Hello and welcome to chapter 53 of The Last Thoughts of a Busy Mind. So, this one, hear this out. I'm gonna name this Overwhelmtion, but when I thought of it, and I thought of it a couple of days ago, I felt like, ooh, that's good, that's a good name. And I thought nobody else has named anything so that's gonna be good. But then I realized, oh yeah, we're in 2021. Everything has been done before. So because of that, I googled it, and there's apparently a book called Bigger Than Overwhelmtion by Melissa Quittem. I hope I didn't mispronounce that. It's on Amazon. You can check it out. So yeah, just because of this similarity, that book got a shout out. But yeah, the week I had was quite overwhelming, and I'm going to talk about that. But before we get there, first, our drink is my newest obsession, the cactus juice drink, the carbonated cactus juice drink, which I've talked about a couple of episodes ago. I got another bottle, and it's been in the fridge, so it's cold and nice and crisp. Let me just take a sip now. Amazing, amazing. So, another thing that happened a lot, and I mean a lot, during this week was podcasts. Like a ton of them. And I'll get to that too. But before I get to my own podcast projects that happened, let me do the shout outs in chronological order. First, I had a very good interaction with the Extreme podcast. I will put a link in the description for them. And we talked about physical media versus digital media. When the episode comes out, I will definitely put it in the description of the episode that comes after it. And then there is the Basement Binge, which was really fun. We talked for over 2 hours about The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is one of my favorite animated movies of all time. And it was really fun. We talked about a lot of deep things about the movie. We get to realize a lot of stuff that honestly I wouldn't think of in any other way. It was a really interesting thing. I mean it was really interesting. I will put a link in the description to both the podcast, the Basement Binge, and the episode I was in because it actually came out. Um, so yeah, it's the first time that I recorded I was a guest on a podcast, and the podcast came out within the same week. It's really exciting. Harrison, the host of that podcast, was really great. Definitely check it out. It's really fun. And another one of the podcasts that I was a guest on came out called Fancy a Bluffer. I will put a link. I'm sorry for that. I will put a link in the description to that episode too, the episode of Fancy a Bluffer where I'm on, and do check it out. That one is both more professional. I talk about filmmaking and a bit personal too. I've talked about Fancy a Bluffer a couple of episodes ago too. And just today, I'm recording this at 1:42 a.m. on Friday. You know, unusual recording hours. It's sort of my gimmick at this point. That and blue croissant syrup and water. But I so just a couple of hours ago, like 4 or 5 hours ago, I was the guest on another podcast called Story Power, which was really good. We talked about, again, movies, because of course, and life in Iran, and just it was a really informal, fun conversation about life in general. I will put a link in the description to that podcast too. Now, so far in the description, if you go, you will find the link to 3 podcasts and 2 episodes. Um, and do check them all out. They are great, and I honestly think you should check them out. But yeah, that's the that's part of the overwhelmation, I guess, because that was very overwhelming, all of these podcasts in a week. And even though I loved it, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed by the end of the week. On top of that, the result for my concours came, and I'm accepted into a university. I needed to go and do a lot of bureaucracy. And for those of you who have been the fans of the show for like a long time, you probably will remember that way back, like way back in season 1, chapter 11, I did an episode called An Ode to Bureaucracy, which was me going around doing a lot of stuff for not going to mandatory conscription. But yeah, I did a lot of that again, this time to get my degree so I can sign up for the other university, which I need to do in the coming week. But that was really bad. Like, oh, sorry. I mean, why the oh, I keep forgetting to uh silence my phone. I should make a habit of that before I start recording. I'm sorry. So yeah, that took a lot of time. It was a lot of running back and forth, getting forms, and just uh, uh, relinquishing my student card, all of that, library card, all of that. And on top of that, there is another podcast that might come out. I will tell you if it does. We did a pilot for it. We were really happy with that. I had a long, long, and emotionally draining um, talk with a friend of mine. You know who I'm talking about. I doubt he'll listen to this, but if he does, hello, you know who you are. And on top of that, there was the girl I talked to you about, but I'll leave that for later. I went out a couple of times to meet with people, meet friends, and as I said, right now I feel like I've gone through like 2 or 3 weeks worth of stuff. I've been overwhelmed, and to be honest, this is the meat of the episode. I'm sorry you had to wait 8 minutes of me talking about my week before we get there. But and again, Mohammed, the friend I talk about in Trekkie Code, he listened to the last ones and he had a note for me, which I mean, it's really hard not to feel self-conscious about that. He said that I think at some point you don't have anything to say, and that is correct because I think I've talked about a lot of the stuff I wanted to, and the other stuff I want to talk about I can't while I'm in Iran. I need to leave first. But that tangent aside, there is this thing that comes from not only the Iranian culture, but the online world that I've seen, and movies, and a lot of that, which shows being overwhelmed as a sign of weakness, like you couldn't handle it. Now, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but part of me always believed that. And that's wrong, simply said. Yeah, I feel overwhelmed. I wrote the script to my next episode, which is probably going to be Sweeney Todd, and yeah, I am overwhelmed. I don't know if what I'm doing is any good, and suddenly, I feel like there's too much happening, and I feel like I can't handle it. And this is seen as a weakness, and it's something that you should be ashamed of. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the case. Because, well, we live in a very overwhelming world. The online world, as great as it is, and it lets me do stuff like this, it's an overwhelming world because you're bombarded by a barrage of news of every corner of the world. And suddenly, fascist rising in the West means that the pseudo fascists in Iran suddenly have an outing. You know what I mean? Because of the world of internet, that fucking orange guy tweets and the fucking Persian guy beats up another Persian kid. I don't want to get into it. So it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I did. Again, a lot of the other stuff happened too. But when I got overwhelmed and I needed to sit down and say, okay, I need to relax for a moment, I felt bad about myself. Like, oh, you can't handle this? This is barely anything. You just had a couple of podcasts and like 5 hours of bureaucracy and a bunch of shit that you did. Why are you overwhelmed? And I felt bad. I felt really bad. I'm gonna take another sip of my drink. And I didn't like that I felt bad. Because even as I began to scold myself, I honestly had all of the justification as well. It's the worst kind of battle when you battle yourself because, you can never win. Nobody knows you better than yourself, and nobody knows how to exploit those weaknesses better than yourself in an argument. But yeah, I knew why I was overwhelmed. There was a lot of emotional stuff happening, there was a lot of mental stuff happening, there was a lot of physical stuff. And for someone who is as physically unfit as I am, that means a lot of strain on literally muscles of my body. So yeah, I felt overwhelmed. Why should I feel bad? Why should I feel like no, no, no? You should be always ready and calm because that's what I've seen movie characters do and TV characters do, and people tell me I should be like when I've seen people who are overwhelmed, and I know that not expressing it and pushing it will only make things worse. For example, and I'm actually glad about this because when I thought about it, my dad recently discussed with me that he was kind of overwhelmed. And for a moment, I maybe didn't realize how important that moment was for him. And I'm sorry for that. I don't think he's listening to this. Basically because I haven't told him about this. But that was a big moment for him to finally admit it because he can't. Because we live in a culture that really tries to mock you for not feeling up to it, for overwhelmtion. Aha. Brand synergy and all of that. So I'm glad that he felt good to say it. I'm kind of sad that it took him reaching this level of overwhelmation to finally admit it. Um, because I know my father, he wouldn't admit it to me if he just didn't admit it to himself. So yeah, that sucks. I've talked about this before. Again, this is the problem. I've talked about all of these before, but I'm trying to find better ways of talking about them to show that I've grown. Because I have. I've grown immensely. There has been days since my fits of anger, even though I had one this week, and I was ready to blast someone's head open, but I was just mostly emotional and worried and fucking hell. I've said this before, but we are too hard on ourselves because of the unrealistic justifications. I know I'm getting more and more left leaning as time passes. By the end of the year, I'm probably a communist, like full on communist. I doubt it because communism, at least in its definition in Iran, has a lot of Leninism in it, and I don't like Leninism, especially in works of government. But anyways, but because we have this myth of people who are calm under all situations, and none of they may appear calm, but I don't think anyone is, because I appear calm. I appear calm most of the time, except if you're a really good friend of me, then you know how uncalm I am at all times. Or you listen to this. That might work too. But I don't realize. I'm trying to understand that. Why did I feel bad about myself? Why did I scold myself? Why did I feel ashamed of myself when I felt overwhelmed? When it's a very normal thing. Because honestly, yeah, things were overwhelming. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that everybody would be overwhelmed in my situation. You probably wouldn't, but we all have our own points. At some point in our journey, we might find stuff too big for us to handle and we will feel overwhelmed. Does the word overwhelmed lost meaning for you yet? But I think it's important to not feel guilty about it. Because, yeah, the world today seems absolutely dreadful. Because it is. It's a dreadful world. Things are happening all the time that are way out of your control, and it seems the world is burning climate change, and we can't do anything about it. And on top of that, you add a lot of emotional problems that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. And to quote my favorite, one of my favorite musicals, it's hard to keep on to the burden of sanity. This is one of the reasons I love Don Quixote, because it's an idea that in this world where everything seems broken, there is still hope. Now that might be a optimistic view, but it's a view I have. I actually talked about it in this very fucking season in an episode called Hope. I really don't have anything to say, do I? It's chapter 48. But I do like that feeling. And after I sat down, relaxed, stood up and went on with my work, I felt much better just because for an hour I just sat down and didn't do anything. I just sat down. I scolded myself for it, but I just sat down, I stared at the wall, and hummed a song. For reference, it was Life on Mars by David Bowie. Na 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 fun of the world with the mouse she had. And I just did that for an hour. It wasn't my most productive hour. It's not the one I will put in my memoir, but that's the problem. Not every hour needs to go in the memoir. Because then it would be too long and too boring and nobody would read it. Not more than other memoirs. So yeah, there are days you may feel overwhelmed because things seem to go out of hand. On those days, you might need to sit down for an hour and just hum a song you love. And there's nothing wrong with that. Do that. It feels good. You'll get up and do your work much better than before. That was the lesson. That 20 minutes I talked to get to this. Anyways, do send me a message on Anchor. I will play it at the beginning of the next episode. And yeah, just be kinder to yourself. Oh, and the usual, do follow me on YouTube, like, subscribe, all of that. And I hope to see you all next week. Next week, if everything goes as planned, it's probably not going to be overwhelming. That's the hope. But things rarely do go according to plan. So There is also that.